Stones and Jawbones is what we're talking about tonight. Let me ask you a question tonight. How many of you have friends, and you have one friend that is absolutely good at everything they do? How many, let's see, how many of you have that one friend? Some of you are like, yeah, I'm my one friend that is good at everything I do. I mean, it's just that one friend. They have talent, they have skill, they can draw, they can play sports, they can do artwork, they have talent, they can do everything. How many of you have friends like that? They're just good at everything, it just makes you sick. You're like, dude, don't do anything else. Even like when they sit in the corner by themselves, you're like, dude, you do that so good. Like, how do you do that? How do you do that? Well, nowadays, it is so important to have skills, to have talent, to have whatever it is that makes someone good at what they're at. And over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about some very talented, skilled individuals. And we're going to be studying the book of Judges, which is in the Bible. So I want to encourage you, over the month of November, I want you to open up to the book of Judges, and I want you to begin to read about these awesome people that we're going to study. See, the book of Judges happened during a very, very dark time for the nation of Israel. It was a very dark time where Israel had turned their back on God. His chosen people decided that they didn't want anything to do with the God that had just delivered them. And this is where we pick up within the book. But see, God raised up a few people who would do some amazing things and still were loyal to who God was. And it's such an interesting story. Judges is one of the most packed, action-packed, just crazy dynamic books of the Bible that you can read. But when we open up to Judges 13, this is how it starts. I want you to tell me if this sounds pretty good to you. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. That doesn't sound like a great beginning of a story. That doesn't sound like where you want to open up a book or start with a movie where you have the main characters turning their back on God and doing evil in the sight of the Lord. See, it's very interesting when I read this today. I was really thinking about this verse. And it spoke to me, and it just really touched me, and it was like, you know what? God does not favor when people do evil. God favors people who do His will. Because listen, I know that I would not want to be delivered to my enemies and have to serve them for the next 40 years. That's not something that I would want to do. But as a result of my action of not serving God, and of not following after God, I'd be delivered in the hand of my enemies. And it's one thing to know God and just choose to ignore Him. It's a whole other thing if you don't know God and walk away from Him. Because those of you that know God, you know His principles, you know His rules, you know what He kind of asks you to live, but you choose to do evil in His sight. The Israelites did the same thing back in the Old Testament. They chose to turn their back on God. So He delivered them into the hands of their enemies, which were the Philistines. Now you got to understand something. The Philistines, they were not good people. They were rough people. They were not nice. They were the arch enemies. They were bad dudes. They were known, this is where Goliath comes from. This is where other giants come from. They were known for being savages, for worshiping an idol called Dagon, which was a half fish, half man type god. And they were the enemies of God. They wanted to do whatever they could to destroy the nation of Israel. But see, God knows that there are some faithful people in the midst of evil. For sometimes our life feels like we're surrounded by evil. We're surrounded by wrong. But there is always someone who is willing to stand up for what is right, that is willing to serve God. And in this time period, we find that there was this elderly couple that served God. They served God with their whole heart, and they asked God to give them a son. And at that time, they were given a son named Samson. He would go on to be one of the greatest judges, but tonight we're going to look about the life of Samson. He was one of the most gifted individuals in the Bible. He had a certain code that he was called to live by. But he chose not to. See, when Samson was born, he was called to be dedicated unto the Lord. And he took what was called a Nazirite vow. And what this simply was, a Nazirite vow simply meant that you were going to be dedicated unto God. And it was a practice that went all the way back. But it was saying, I'm voluntarily giving myself unto God. And there was like 3 main rules that you could not do. Number 1 is that you could not touch a dead body of any kind. If it's a parent, a friend, or a pet, no matter what, you could not touch anything that was dead. Because they believed that you need to be separated from the effect of what was sin, which is death. Number 2 is this. They were not to eat or drink anything from the grapevine. So they weren't to drink wine or grape juice or anything like that. Because back in that time, wine or grape juice, it was symbolic to be dedicated unto God. And they said, listen, this isn't for you to drink. This is for something sacred. And then thirdly, they weren't allowed to cut their hair. So there were some hairy people walking around. No razor was to touch their head because it was an outward demonstration to people to say, you know what, I'm going to serve God, so I'm not going to cut my hair. Today, we wouldn't think anything of it because people cut their hair all the time. But back then, it was an outward demonstration. Samson was to never cut his hair. So he wasn't to touch anything dead. He wasn't to drink anything with grape juice in it or any type of grape. And he wasn't to cut his hair. Now see, as Samson grew up to be this amazing man. He lived in a culture where physical strength, being strong, was a pinnacle thing. It was very important to be a man of strength. Now see, Samson was that one guy that all the guys wanted to be like, and that all the women wanted to be with. I mean, he was your macho man. He was the dude. He was charming. He was witty. He was strong. He had everything. Samson had it all. People wanted to be like him. They wanted to be with him all the time. But this is where we're going to pick up. We're going to pick up in Judges chapter 14, verses 1 through 2. It says this: Samson went down to Timnah and saw a young Philistine woman there. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a woman. Now go and get her for me. That's what he said. He said, Mom and Dad, I saw this really attractive woman. Now go get her for me. Now, it doesn't say that Samson knew her. It doesn't say that he spent time with her. It says that he simply saw her and he wanted her. He just was like, yep, I want you. Mom and Dad, go get her for me. Can you imagine if it was like that today? If you're just like, hey, look, I want that. Mom, Dad, go get it for me now. Right now. But what's interesting in this passage of Scripture, it says that he saw. Now listen to me, check this out, because this is going to come back. It said that he saw her, to see her. It was presented before him, and he saw her there. This is going to be the most important phrase that we are going to study tonight, is to see. Because he saw something that he wanted. And Samson's philosophy was, hey, you know what? I see it, I want it, it's mine. I'll get what I want, when I want, whenever I want it. I'm just going to take it. Samson was so concerned about what he wanted rather than what God wanted for his life. It reminds me about how we are a lot of times. We see something and we instantly want it. We don't look to God to see if that's what God wants for us, but we say, you know what? I see that person, or I see this relationship, or I see this object, and I want it. So it's going to become mine. This is what I want. See, Samson thought that his talent, his character, his good looks, his charm, his strength gave him permission to do whatever he wanted. He was like the all-star football player of the high school. And he thought just because he was the all-star, that he could do what he wanted when he wanted. Now, I remember being in school, and I remember individuals who acted like this all the time. That one student in your school that just like, they think they run the whole school. Yeah, see, all of you are like, yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. They thought that they were the best thing ever invented. They thought they were the best person. They said, you know what? It's all about me. This is how Samson was. He was very, very arrogant. But see, Samson had a gift. And tonight I want to talk a little bit about gifts. Some of you, you have gifts. You have talents. You have great gifts and talents. Some of you are still discovering what you're good at, what you're talented at, what God has blessed you with. But I want you to understand this tonight. The greater your gifts, the harder it is to see beyond your giftedness. I'm going to read that again. The greater your gifts, the harder it is to see beyond your giftedness. Your gifts are not actually you. Your gifts are not actually you. They are a... Oh, come on, people. They are a gift. Which means what? It was given to you as a gift. God said, you know what? I'm going to make them be able to play basketball really well. Here's your gift. I'm going to make them very smart. Here's your gift. I'm going to make them a really good soccer player. Here's your gift. I'm going to make them a really good art person. Here's their gift. I'm going to give them the gift to sing. Here's their gift. And God gave gifts to all these people. And God gave gifts to Samson. I want you to think of someone who's really, really gifted. An athlete, a movie star, whoever it was. Now I want you to think about, there's an individual, let's see if you can guess who I'm going to say. There was an individual, she was awesome at what she had done. She was great in her giftedness. She did so well. She was beautiful, she was talented, she had wealth, she had connections. Her father was a superstar. Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus. Oh, what about another one? What about Lindsay Lohan? Lindsay Lohan. But listen to me. These girls, listen to me. This is very interesting. These girls were talented. They are talented. They have great gifts that they're really good at. But because of their giftedness, it crushes them. Their giftedness, being as good as they are, and who they are, they weren't able to handle what they were blessed with as a gift. Being talented, being giftedness is good and it's important. But there's something that's more important than being gifted. It's having character. If you have a pen and a paper tonight, if you have your phone, I want you to put this down and I want you to never forget this. Talent will take you only where character can keep you. I want you to write this down tonight. Talent will take you only where character can keep you. See, talent will take you so far, but it is who you are and your character that is going to keep you where you are at. Talent can get you wherever you want to be, but talent can also destroy you. Because if you don't have good character, if you aren't a good person in who you are, you're not going to be able to make it. What is character? Character is that inner strength that you live with integrity in your relationship with God and with people. Character is that integrity that you have within yourself. Character it makes you trustworthy. It makes you authentic. It makes you humble. Character gives you the strength to support what God has blessed you with. Some of you have talents. Some of you have talents that God has blessed you with. But you know what's going to keep your talent is your character. The character that you have before God. How many people like to hang out with people that are arrogant? Arrogant. They're big-headed. They think that they're the best. How many of you like to hang out with people who are not trustworthy, that lie? How many of you like to hang out with people that are flaky and that aren't real? How many of you like to hang out with people that stab you in the back? You bunch of liars. Character. Now see, this is where Samson lacked a lot of stuff. Because he had the talent, but he didn't have the character. And this is what we're going to see. Let's jump to this verse because this is crazy. It said, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power while he was traveling, that he encountered a lion. So he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as one might have torn a young goat apart. Listen to me. When's the last time you were at the zoo and saw a lion? Lions are not little small like kitty cats. Lions are big, huge, strong monsters. They're huge. When's the last time you turned on the news and it was like, oh yeah, Ed was down at the zoo today and he ripped a lion apart with his bare hands? You don't hear that. You don't hear that that's going on. That's not something that goes on. Now listen to me. I don't want you to run down to the zoo, jump in the lion's cage, and say, hey, I'm going to tear all of you lions apart. And say, oh, Pastor Micah told me a story about this. Because it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him that allowed him. A lot of talking going on tonight, guys. Stay with me. I don't want you to miss this tonight. This guy had unbelievable strength that God had blessed him with. So God used him to be able to destroy and rip apart this lion. Let's go on a little bit later on what happened here. Sometime later, he went back to marry this woman that he saw. He turned aside on his journey and he saw the lion's carcass. And in it, he saw a swarm of bees that had made some honey. He scooped down and took out the honey with his hands and he ate it as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some and they ate it too. But he did not tell them that he got it from the dead lion's carcass. Now, I know when I'm traveling down the road, I like to stop at like Starbucks or like Cinnabon or play like something like that. I don't stop and say, hey, look, roadkill, there's bees in it, let me eat it. I don't look to just dig my hand down into a lion's dead brains and pull out a bunch of honey and just like go on my way and like eat my honey. That's not what I'm going to do. But see, this is what Samson did. But let me remind you, what was one of the things, the vows that Samson was to take? He was to take a vow to never go around anything that was dead. To never touch. So vow number one, broken. Because he scooped out the honey out of the dead lion. Why did he do this? Because he wanted to. He felt like he could because of who he was. Not only does he eat it, but he takes it home to mom and dad and says, hey, have some honey. Eat some honey. And so he allows his parents to also violate a law that they dedicated their son to withhold. But yet again, he sees what he wants, he takes what he wants. And he doesn't have the character or strength to do this. Now let's go on. Let's get back to this wedding. Okay, so he's getting married to his fiancée. Judges 14:10 says this. Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast, which was a party, as was customary for that men. I went back and I looked, and the Hebrew word here for the feast refers to a drinking party. So here, you have him break one vow, then he goes to this feast and he breaks another vow. He begins to drink wine, and he was told not to drink this wine. And then we go on to Judges 14, verse 11. When people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. And he said to them, let me tell you a riddle. If you can give me the answer within 7 days of this feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. They said, tell us your riddle, they said. He replied, out of the eater something to eat, out of the strong something sweet. And for 3 days he gave them an opportunity to give an answer. What was the riddle about? The riddle about the lion and him taking the honey out of the lion. So not only does he break a vow to God, but then he mocks God by making fun of the very thing that he was asked not to do. Think about that. The very thing that God asked him not to do, he did, and then he made it think like it was funny. I could really go off here and talk about how we know what is wrong and we know what is not right, but yet we choose to do it and then think it's funny while we're doing it. even though we know God has called us not to. But I'm going to leave that there and let you think about that yourself. So as we go on in the story, it says this in verse 14, verse 18. Before sunset on the seventh day, the man of the town said to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson said to them, "If you have not plowed with my heifer, you would have not solved my riddle." Let me explain to you some just basic rules in life that you don't do to people. Number one, you don't punch an MMA fighter dead in the face. Number two, you don't blow your boogers in Superman's cape. Number three, you don't talk about someone's mama. And then, when you are a mama, you don't talk about somebody's children. And the other thing that you do not ever do, you do not ever call your fiance a fat cow. Okay? You do not call your future wife a fat cow. You don't do this. But yet this is what Samson did. He said, you know what? The only way you got the answer is because you talked to my heifer of a fiance. Can you imagine the fire in that chick's eyes when she heard her future fiance call her a fat cow? Needless to say, hold on, I'm not done yet. So he calls his wife a fat cow. Calls her a fat cow. But then what goes on to happen? Because they got the riddle right, Samson throws a temper tantrum. How many of you ever had a temper tantrum? Come on. Well, listen to this, listen to this. This is Samson's temper tantrum. He goes to a nearby town and he kills 30 people and takes their clothes. He kills 30 men, strips them of their garments, and gives them to the groomsmen because that was the deal. So he calls his fiancée a fat cow. He goes and then kills 30 men to provide the men who betrayed him with clothes. I want you to understand something. That Samson's character and integrity was not right. But as we go on in the story to find out, this chick still wanted to marry him. She still wanted to marry him. So as it went on, Samson shows up at the home to the fiancé to get the wedding underway. And he says, okay, let's do this. But the father of his future bride said, you know what? I kind of just let her marry that other dude. Okay. If your future son-in-law can go and kill 30 people without blinking, you got some guts to give his wife, future wife, to another man. Can you imagine being that other man? They probably got married. He's like, listen, babe, we're moving to Mexico. Okay? Samson, he's going to find me, and he's going to kill me. But you know what Samson does? Samson gets upset. So he goes and finds foxes. Okay, foxes. A fox. Yeah, foxes are pretty fast. But he finds a ton of foxes. He gets them and he ties their tails together. He lights them on fire and sends them through the fields of his father-in-law and of the Philistines. Now listen to me. I want you to imagine with me. Imagine that we are all held captive by another nation, and they are holding us captive. And then all of a sudden, one of you guys decide, you know what, I'm going to go get married to one of them. It doesn't work out. You go nuts. You kill 30 people, and then you go and you light a bunch of foxes' tails on fire, and you send them scurrying through the enemy's camp. Being on this side I would probably tie you down with zip ties and give you to the enemy. Be like, dude, just take them. Just take them. Because remember, Samson is he's not a Philistine. He went to the camp, he killed 30 of them, he set the fields on fire, he had a tremendous temper tantrum. It was really, really bad. His temper tantrum was so bad. So his own people said, you know what, we're going to give him up. And we're going to give him to the Philistines so that they can kill him and destroy him. And we pick this up in Judges 15, verses 14 and 15. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes of his arms became like flax. He broke them. He found a jawbone. He struck down, I mean, he killed. Not 1, not 10, not 100, not 300, not 500. The dude killed 1,000 men by himself. 1,000 men. Samson went crazy, okay? He went nuts. What he did is he picked up a jawbone of a donkey. And this is what he killed 1,000 men with. Okay, Jet Li, Jackie Chan, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jason Statham, none of these guys could kill 1,000 men. Maybe Chuck Norris. That'd be a good matchup. Chuck Norris versus Samson. Chuck Norris would wink and Samson would fall over. I'm just playing. I want you to think about that. 1,000 people, 1,000 warriors. These weren't just like little dudes who were like, okay, we're coming out to fight. No, these were grown men that he killed 1,000 of. The writer compares him to Shamgar, who up until that time was considered the most powerful warrior. He killed 600 people with a little sharp stick. But I want you to understand something. When we read this passage that talks about Samson picking up a jawbone, in the Hebrew it means a fleshly jawbone. It would have been considered a dead body. Yet again, he's breaking another vow. Another vow. But it goes on to say, in Judges 15:20, that Samson then led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. In the days of the Philistines. See, Samson was a leader, but he never led them anywhere. It reminds me of some students that I have conversations with sometimes. Let me be honest. I know that you're a leader, but you're not leading anybody anywhere. God has called you. He's equipped you. He's given you talent and skills and giftedness. He's called you to be a leader. But you're not leading anyone anywhere. And see, this is what's happened with Samson. He did not lead anyone anywhere. So over the years, the Philistines recognized that he was still a threat to them, that he could overthrow them at any point. But he never did anything. And then we go on with the story. A few years later, he fell in love with a woman whose name was Delilah. And see, Delilah lived in the valley of Sorek. The Hebrew word for Sorek was vine or grapevine. Yet again, a forbidden place where he should not have been. But it goes on and interesting. In 16:5, the rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, hey, see if you can get the secret of his strength so that we can overpower him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So the very enemy of God saw that the man of God was at a weak point and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to his weakness. For Samson, his weakness was women. And so they went to Delilah and they said, see if you can find the source of his strength. So for a while he kind of played with them. He said, oh, well, it's this or it's that, or it's this or it's that. And there was a few times the Philistines would rush in to get him, and he'd break the bonds, or he'd break the flask that was holding him, and he'd kill a bunch of Philistines. And then Delilah would cry and whine and cry and whine. So then one day what ended up happening, in verse 19, he told her what had happened. He said, listen, if you cut my hair, my strength's going to go away. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she had called someone over to shave off the 7 braids of his hair and began to subdue him. And that day his strength left him. What just happened? He broke the 3rd vow. He had now abandoned all 3 vows, and he abandoned his calling. What's left? After you break all the rules, and after you break all the vows, and after you do everything, what's left anymore? What was left for Samson? Nothing. Nothing was left for him. There was nothing available to him. He had abandoned everything. His strength left him. The Philistines overtook them. He allowed his weak point in a relationship with a woman he should not have been with, Delilah. Let me tell you something about Delilah. Delilah knew what she was doing. She was willing to sell out someone to get the source of the strength so she could have the wealth that she wanted. And what's crazy about Delilah's spirit is not dead. The spirit of Delilah, the spirit of deception, of saying, I'm going to do this for me. Or what's the source here? Or what can I do for you here? In return, what can you give to me? The spirit of Delilah is not dead. It's still around. It still exists. It's still in existence of what is going on. But Delilah, she was evil. She allowed the man of God who was called to lead Israel to become weak. As we go on and read in verse 20, she said, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He woke up from his sleep thinking he had still had his strength. I'll go out as I did before. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. I highlighted that last section because I think if there's a verse in the Bible that's pretty serious, is realizing he did not know that the Lord had left him. See, God has given up Samson and given up on kind of using him as a leader, as the one who would bring total freedom. God still loved him, but God removed from him. God said, you know what? I gave you opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. I gave you a talent, a giftedness to do things that nobody else could do, to be something that nobody else could be. I gave you an opportunity, and you gave it up time and time again because you had giftedness, but you didn't have the character to keep it. And the Lord's Spirit had left Samson. And what's sad is he didn't even realize it. He did not even realize that the Lord had left. Giftedness is bestowed upon an individual, but your character is forged and created through the fight that you do in life every day. Giftedness is bestowed and placed upon you, but character is forged. To be a man or woman of good integrity, of good character, it's not easy. It's a fight. It's saying that I'm going to make the right decisions when everybody else is making the wrong decisions. That I'm going to go against what everybody else does and do what's right, simply because it's right. I think if you had 100 teenagers who said, you know what, I'm going to stand up for what's right, and I'm going to be a man or woman of character, of integrity. I'm going to do what's right just simply because it's right. I believe it would change our community and change our world. Some of you have gifts, talents that God has given to you, but your character is pretty sad. Who you are as a person, the character of who you are, you're wasting it. You're wasting the gift that God has blessed you with. As we go on to read what happened to Samson, the Philistines seized him. They basically gouged and plucked out his eyes. They binded him with bronze and shackles, and they sent him into a grinding green in the prison. You know what's really interesting to me when I read this verse? It says they gouged out his eyes. To me, that's very interesting, because that's the very thing that Samson lived for, satisfying the longing of his eyes. Because it's his eyes that were the thing that betrayed him. His eyes were the very thing that got him in trouble. I see that woman, I want her, go get her. I see this, I see that. I see a dead lion with honey, I want it, take it. I see another woman, I want her. I see this, I see that. The very thing that he lived for to satisfy his eyes were the very thing that were plucked out of his head. And then the other thing that really sticks out to me, it says the Philistines seized him. See, until this time, no one could seize Samson. Nobody could hold Samson down. Nobody could put Samson in shackles and him not break out of it. No one could beat Samson. Nobody could do it. But he gave up the secret and source of his strength. And now a group of people could overcome him. His collapse was complete and full. But the thing is that the God that we serve is such a God of grace. After all that Samson had done, after all of his failures, his screw-ups, God would still use him one more time. And maybe for the first time in his life, Samson would have a character that he would forge that he's never had before. It took Samson losing his strength, getting his eyes plucked out, being thrown into a green wheel, where what he does every day is he pushes a pillar round and round and round, and that's all he does every day. It took someone that was called by God to be seized, for his eyes to be taken out, to be shackled, to be made fun of. He basically became the Philistines' play toy. When they wanted someone to beat up on, I'm sure they beat up on Samson. When they wanted someone to spit on, I'm sure they spit on Samson. It took someone to go through literally hell to realize that character is what matters. Character is what's going to keep his strength. One day during a party that the Philistines were having, they said, you know what, let's bring out Samson and let's mock him and let's beat him and let's just all go against Samson. So what they did is they brought him up to an area and they placed his one hand on this pillar, his other hand on this pillar, and they began to mock him and they began to ridicule him and they began to just totally watch him, make him perform and do things, and they would do things that he never wanted to do. And I can say, God, I'm sorry. God, you gifted me with something at one point in my life. But I sold out because I was an egomaniac, because I was selfish, because I wanted what I wanted when I wanted. So God, I'm sorry, I sold out to you. And he placed his hand on both pillars. He said, God, if you could just give me that strength one more time, just one more time, I will deliver the Philistines into your hands. But God, just be with me one more time. It says in Scripture that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and he pushed the pillars down, and he killed all of the Philistines and himself in that party. And up to that day, no one had killed as many Philistines in a day than he did. But I think what's interesting is when I looked at Samuel's life, this is what I wrote out. I had 2 points. Number 1, it's not enough to live avoiding compromise. We were made to live for something. That's our purpose. We must seek it, we must understand it, and we must go after it with everything that we can. God has created each and every one of you for something. He's given you a strength in something. He wants you to go after it. He wants you to seek it. He wants you to find it. And then He wants you to use it for Him. But in order to find what you need to find, you need a real reflection of who you are in Christ. If I have a mirror and I walk up to a mirror, I look at a mirror and I can see what I have on. I can see who I am. But see, sometimes we can't just go and stand in front of a mirror. We need to go and stand in front of Jesus and say, Jesus, you be the mirror and examine my life. What do you see, Jesus, when you look at me? And that's the very thing that we need to see when we look for it. My second point was this, is we need to pray for gifts, wisdom, understanding. But we must pray that God will give you opportunities to build the inner strength that you need to handle the talent or gift that God has blessed you with. If God has given you a talent or given you a gift of influence, you need to be wise with who you are. I want everybody to look at me tonight. Everyone. I want all eyes here for just a few moments. I'm not going to be much longer tonight. I have talked about it many, many Tuesdays and Wednesday nights. That I believe God is raising your generation to be a generation like never before. That you will be a generation that truly hungers and thirsts after what God wants for you. That you won't compromise, that you won't quit, that you won't give up. But you're in it for the real deal. You'll struggle, you'll have a hard time, but you'll pick yourself up, you'll dust yourself off, and you'll keep going. Things might not be easy, they might be hard, but you continually push forward. I believe that God is raising a generation of young people who are truly going to seek His face no matter what. And they're going to be seekers of the kingdom of God. I believe that with my whole heart. But my question to you and my problem that I have is that there are a lot of you sitting in this room that I have looked eyeball to eyeball with. And I said, do you know that you're a leader? Do you know that you have influence? Do you know that people look up to you? Do you know that you can lead this youth group where you want it to go? Do you know that you can bring revival to this area? Do you know that you are created to be a leader? That you are like Saul, who is a head taller than everybody else in this ministry? That you're a leader. You might not be great all the time, but you're a leader. We read tonight, Samson, he definitely messed up big, but God used him. Because listen to me, it's not about my abilities, but it's about who God calls and God places. It's about having a relationship and just saying, you know what, God, I'm going to give you this day today, and I'm going to try my best to lead the best way that I can. I'm going to try my best to be a leader the way that you have called me to. There are 2 types of people in this room tonight. There are leaders and there are followers. There are those that will lead without any, you know what? There are leaders in here who say, you know what? I don't care if anybody follows me. I'm doing what's right. I'm following after God. I'm going to try to do my best, and I'll really try to live this out the best I can. And you go after God with everything in you. There are leaders in this room. But then there are followers who are just going to follow and just go whichever way the crowd goes. The crowd does this, I'm going to do that. The crowd does this, I'm going to do that. You know what? I don't care if you have messed up. I don't care if you screwed up. I don't care if you had some horrible tragedy. I don't care if you've been involved with some of the most messed up stuff ever. Guess what? God uses messed up people all the time. Read the Bible. Everyone in the Bible was messed up. Everybody. Every single person who we read in the scriptures was messed up. So if God can use a bunch of messed up people, He can use you to be the leader that God has called you to be. He can use you to step up the way that you need to. But listen to me. When you step up, is your character going to keep you there? Is your relationship with God going to keep you where you need to be? And I hope you understand tonight, when I say character, I mean your relationship with God. My character of who I am is based upon my love of the Father. Why I act the way I do, why I do things the way that I do, is solely based on my relationship with my dad. And I'm not talking my earthly dad. I'm talking my heavenly Father. I have a Father that loves me, who cheers me on, who wants me to fight, who gives me strength every day to get up and to do things. I have a God that's on my side. I have a Father that will never leave me, and He'll never forsake me. But more importantly, see, my Father is the King of Kings, which means I'm one of His sons, which means I have an inheritance that He has given to me, which means I'm a child of the King. And being a child of the King, I'm royalty. What does royalty do? Royalty leads. Being a prince, you lead. Being a king, you lead. Being a queen, you lead. Being a princess, you lead. You are a child of God, young person. You are called to be a king or a queen. You are called to be a prince and a princess. You are called to lead. But as you lead, do you follow after the heart of God? Brent, come up and Brent, you just come up and just play. I don't want anybody moving because I think this is from some of the band members tonight too. God called Samson. And Samson went and he lived the call. He tried to do it. But he failed over and over again because he violated what he was called to do. And tonight, I'm not gonna say everyone bow your heads, close your eyes. I want you to examine your life. Those of you that have had conversations with people and said, you know what, there's something inside of me. I know I'm supposed to be different. I know I'm not supposed to be this way. But I keep doing this. You know what Paul says? Paul says, you know what, I love God. But I keep messing up and I keep screwing up. But I want to do right, but I keep doing wrong. I want to live for God, but I keep messing up. I don't know what I am doing. Because I love God, but I also do sin. And I need help. But I know that my help comes from the Lord. Listen to me, young person. God has called you to lead. I don't care if you're the youngest person in here or if you're a senior and you only have 6 or 7 months left. One thing I wish I could do is go back to a senior year in a school and take my whole senior year and dedicate it to leaving a legacy. A real legacy. Where people said, oh, that Micah, man, he loved God. He told everybody about God. Oh, he was just about God all the time. He loved God. Everybody knew he loved God. That's the legacy I wish I could have left. That's a legacy you can leave. You might say, Pastor Micah, I've gone too far. I screwed up. No, you haven't. There's nothing that you have done so bad that God can't forgive you of. And being a leader is not easy. Being a leader is not fun. People watch you. They examine you. They wait for you to mess up. They hope you mess up. But see, I'm not leading people because I want to. I'm leading people because I've been called to. Just like some of you tonight. You've been called to be a leader. God has called you. With all eyes up here tonight, my question is this. Are you ready to quit playing games? Are you ready to just quit coming and just having a hangout? Are you ready just to quit coming to socialize? To see that girl and to see that boy? Are you ready to be the leader that God has called you to be? Are you ready to be bold? And you know what? You might be the meekest, quietest person, but you know what? You lead. You can lead. Because necessarily you say stuff, I'll listen to what you say. But if you live it, I'll really watch. And if you live it out, I might really follow you. You don't have to go stand on top of the rooftop and tell everybody, I love Jesus, come to know Jesus. But you can live it every day in your school. You can make the right decisions and be a person of character and integrity. But my question is, are you ready to take that step? So I'm going to ask you something bold tonight. In front of all your friends, in front of where everybody can see you, I'm going to ask you tonight, are you a leader? I want to know tonight in this place, who's a leader? Who's going to be someone that's going to lead a generation? See, it's very common in the world that we live in. In the time of the Philistines, it was dark. People of righteousness, and he had to raise up people that maybe didn't want to be used, and he had to raise up meek people. We're going to talk about many different women and men that God raised up to be a judge. And we live in a very dark place today. We live in a society that is so filled with sin, and God is looking for a judge to stand up and say, I'm going to live for God, and I'm going to declare his righteousness. So very simple tonight, my question. Who's the leader? Who's the leader? Listen, not everybody's going to stand up, but that's fine. That's fine. Those of you still in your seats, you might not even follow after God. You might not even have a relationship with God. But are you a leader? I want you to do me a favor tonight. I just want you to look at each other. I want you to look around. It's not a funny thing. It's not games. But I want you to look around to see who's standing. You're a leader. You're standing amongst leaders. You know now who the leader is. And this is my second question. For those of you that are still seated, do you want to be a leader? Do you want God to use you, and do you want to be a leader? Because trust me, you might have a desire to be a leader inside of you, and you might not feel like you lead, but something inside of you right now is pushing you to say, you know what, I can be a leader. I can do this. I can stand for God. If that's you, I want you to stand up too. If there's something deep inside of you that says, you know what, I want to be a leader. I do. I want this to be real. Bow your heads and close your eyes tonight.